Now, we've talked a little bit about code tables in terms of substitution group heads allowing us to use either a code table or a text version. Now we're going to talk about the code tables themselves and how the NIEM shows actual code tables. First of all, code tables are pretty awesome. They limit allowed values to a defined set. In other words, you don't have arbitrary text, you've got a set number of different values that are allowed. And that allows you to have increased data integrity because you can check the information you get against the code table to see if you've gotten data that's valid for the code table. Now, it doesn't mean it's absolutely valid data. I mean, if I have a code table about eye color and one of the options is blue and one of the options is violet, and I put blue down but I actually have violet eyes, then the data's still wrong, but at least it's constrained better than if I put kind of a soft green and a candle glow. I mean, that's kind of silly, but that's the trouble is if you don't have a code list, if you don't have code tables, you get all sorts of arbitrary data. So code lists are great. Now, NIEM code lists can be arbitrarily long. They can have really as many codes as you need. They don't have to be short, and some of the NIEM code tables are, thousands of codes long. They really are. There's some really long ones. So they can be arbitrarily long. Individual codes in a code table can also be arbitrarily long. They're not limited to 3 characters. Now, sometimes that's what you have. The eye color code table, the color blue, the code is BLU. There are only 3 letters. Some codes are only 2 letters. Some codes are full strings. Some codes are even strings with white space in between. So they're multiple words with spaces in between, and that's still the actual code value. The NIEM and XML schema, they don't really care how long your codes are. They only care that the data that you sent matches one of the entries in the code table. Finally, code tables in the NIEM are organized by authoritative source via namespaces. We talked about namespaces. Different authoritative sources have their own namespaces, and that's where their code tables are defined, allowing us to update those code tables without actually making any changes to domains or to NIEM core. FBI is one example. The FBI has their own namespace for their FBI code tables, and they're the authoritative source, and they maintain those. So here's a schema showing us how we make a code table. Now, the first thing to know is that there's really 2 parts to making a scheme code table. The first part is called making the simple type. Now, we're looking at here is something called caseworker category code. So it's going to be codes for a caseworker who's part of a case, hence the name caseworker. And there's going to be different codes for the kind of caseworker it is. Now, the simple type part of it is where we actually define the entries in the code table. So if we look down a little bit, we'll see what's a simple type. It means it just contains data. If we go down a third of the way, we see its base. And normally we've been seeing extension base equals something, meaning we're taking some base and extending it to add things to it. But with code tables, we're doing the opposite. We're taking a base and restricting it down to a smaller subset of valid values. In this case, the base is token. Now, you probably haven't seen this yet. What is token? Well, token is simply a string with the white space taken away. The white space at the beginning and the end. Not white space in the middle of the string, but white space at the beginning and white space at the end. You'll see when you do XML work that sometimes you put the data on the next line indented. So there's lots of extra white space around data in an XML document. And with a token, that white space is stripped off the beginning and the end. Why? Because you're going to match exactly to the token values, and if you're going to match exactly to those values, you better strip the leading and tailing white space off because that's not going to match up. So that's why we base off of token, and that's what token does for us. So we've got this concept of token, which is a string with the white space at the beginning and the end taken away. Then what we have is a number of enumerations. In each enumeration is a code table value. So you'll see the very first enumeration there is AD, and then in that, we see an annotation and documentation tags, very similar to what we see for a schema as a whole and for elements and types, where they have that annotation and then they have the documentation tags. This time, what's in the documentation tags is the value that that code stands for. So in this case, AD stands for adoption. That's the code for adoption. The next one you see is IN, and that's the code for investigator. Then you'll see a whole bunch were removed because we just can't put too many on the slide or you can't read it. But the last one is SU for supervisor. So the end result here is we have a simple type that has a number of values in it. and it's basically a code table. And the piece we see right here, missing all the stuff I deleted for the sake of space, is we have 3 codes, AD, IN, and SU, and those stand for Adoption, Investigator, and Supervisor. So here's the second part of making a code list. Now, in the previous slide, we saw that we made this simple type that contains the actual codes of the code table, the actual values against which you would match whatever information you're getting to see if it's in the code table. Now we need to turn it into something we can use in the NIEM. So the first step is to wrap it up in a complex type. Here, that complex type is called caseworker category code type. It's basically the same name, only without the word simple in there. And what do we do to our simple type? All we do is we add an attribute group called S:simple object attribute group, and that adds the infrastructure that we expect all our NIEM elements to have so that we can link them together and do all the kinds of things we want to do with them. So that's step one. Take that simple type, wrap it in a complex type, adding the attributes we need. It's very much the ssame thing we do with NIEM-XSD when we add NIEM infrastructure pieces to things like strings, numbers, and booleans. Then the second step is to make an element of that type. There's no good having the code table in a type if we don't have an element. So that's where we make the element, in this case, caseworker category code. It's the code version of the caseworker category. And of course, there is a text version as well, which would be called caseworker category text. And so that's why we see there a substitution group called caseworker category, which acts as a substitution group head so that we can use our caseworker category code that we just created here, or we could use the text version as well. And so that is how the NIEM implements code lists. So suppose you want your own code list. How do you make one? Well, it depends on the size of your table. If you're making a small code table, here's how I do it. I'll go and I'll copy the XML for an existing code table out of the NIEM. Person sex is an easy one to take because it's easy to find and it's easy to think of. You grab the XML for that and change the values and definitions to whatever you need. If you need fewer codes, delete a few. If you need a few more, copy one of them, paste it a few times, and change the values and definitions. Seriously, that's how I make small tables. It's a lot easier than trying to remember how to make a simple type and wrap it correctly in a complex type. Just grab it out of the NIEM, change the names to meet your needs. If you've got a large table where you've really got hundreds of values and you just don't want to cut and paste and type all that in, there is a NIEM code list generator. Now, I'm not putting the link here because I hate putting links in slides and videos. Can't click on them. But you can find it either at NIEM.gov or you can find it on the training site that you found these materials on. You can use the NIEM code list generator to take a spreadsheet and convert that to a code list. Now, there are some rules you have to follow in how you format the spreadsheet, but it's actually very slick. And you can have a really big spreadsheet with all sorts of codes and definitions and just have this generator quickly turn that into a NIEM XML code list for you. And so for a larger table, that is definitely the way to go. So let's do a quick exercise regarding code lists. Now, here's the thing. There are multiple organizations and domains that maintain code lists in the NIEM, including ISO, FIPS, NIST, I mentioned FBI earlier, and there are others. The problem is this can result in multiple code lists for a single concept. You can have a single concept and have different authoritative sources have slightly different code tables for representing that concept. The code tables are going to be close, but they're not exactly the same. So you'll find multiple code lists for the same concept. Now take the concept of a country. How many code lists do you think there are for the concept of a country? Well, that's the point of the exercise. Use NIEM Wayfair or whatever tool you want, SSGT, the schemas themselves. Wayfair is particularly good at finding code list values. So it's a pretty good tool for this exercise. But the idea is, whatever tool you want, find all the code lists that include the United States as one of its values. So here are solutions. I hope you didn't stop with the first one you found, because there's a lot more than one. We've got, 4 different FBI ones. There's LIS code simple type, LSTA code simple type, POB code simple type, RES code simple type. 4 different FBI codes that all deal with codes for countries, and they all include the United States in there in some way, shape, or form as one of the codes in the table. Then there's a FIPS 10-4 code called International State Code Simple Type, so that's codes for countries as well. But wait, there's more. There's a second FIPS 10-4 code called Country Code Simple Type. There's also 3 ISO 3166 codes, Country Alpha 2 Code Simple Type, Country Alpha 3 Code Simple Type, and Country Numeric Code Simple Type. Yes, those are 2-letter codes, 3-letter codes, and numeric codes. So That's a total of 9. 9 different code tables for the concept of a country, and they've all got slightly different ways of representing those different country codes. So just so you know, there's more than one way to do these kind of things in the NIEM. It's just what happens when you have multiple authoritative sources providing code tables for what are fairly common concepts.